Hi everybody and welcome to the Curious Geographer Live. Today is super exciting. We are joined by the University of Cambridge, but particularly Queen's College, and we are joined also by two students who are also going to tell us all about their university experience. And if there's any questions, please write them in the comments. If you haven't already seen the schedule already, then there's the QR code. You can scan it whilst it's on the screen here, and also just get the poster because we've got lots of live events coming up soon and about lots of different universities. So we're going to jump straight in, but yeah, if you have comments or questions, please write them in the comments area, and we'll try and answer all your questions to find out what it is like studying geography at the University of Cambridge. So I'm going to start off. One of our guests is Dr. Graham Denyer Willis. So if you could just, Graham, if you could just introduce yourself to us and tell us a bit about your role at the University of Cambridge and why you think students should study geography there.
Sure. Hi, I'm Graham Denyer Willis. I'm what we call a director of studies and a fellow at Queen's College. At Cambridge, every college has typically a fellow and a director of studies in a given subject. And that person is responsible for helping to coordinate all of the teaching, doing the admissions, and generally, I think, trying to build some of the community around a particular subject area. And so my responsibility is to think through how different students are engaging with the program, or what we call a tripos, what courses they want to take, why they want to take them, what kind of dissertation they're going to write, and those sorts of things. And it's a very kind of personal interaction that I have with people like Victoria and Hannah, who will be talking in a little bit, where I'll follow them throughout the whole process from the very first time that they walk into the room to do an interview to the very last time when they graduate and leave. So that whole process is something that I don't want to say I oversee, because I think it's much more personal than that. And it's a very interesting thing to think about for anyone who's applying, whichever college you might be applying to, really at Cambridge or Oxford. Why should you come to Cambridge, or particularly to Queen's, to study geography? Well, I mean, we could parse that question in lots of ways. I think for me, especially, geography is an exceptionally interesting subject that allows young people and people in general to think about all of the kind of big challenges and problems that we see in the world today, right? Whether that's health and COVID, whether that is something like Brexit and migration, whether that's something about violence in the world. All of those are interesting questions that we can think through, and we do think through geography, both in the offerings that we have on the various papers or courses that exist at Cambridge, but also in the way that you can bring your own interests to the way that you study the world and try to learn and want to think about how to solve some of the problems that exist in the world. So geography is, I think, a really good way to approach things that exist in the world, and especially good for people who are really interested in thinking about, how we might think about why the world is the way it is, and how we might also then start to think about how we might make it better. How do we approach those problems? What do they mean? What do we do? Right. So I think Cambridge is an interesting place to do that, because it allows for a very personal interaction, and it's a lot of small group teaching and things like that. So there's lots of good reasons to apply and to think about it as a good place to come and study. But Hannah and Victoria, I'm sure will be able to say a lot more about that too.
Super, thanks. And yeah, and as you said, we are joined by Hannah and Victoria. So let's jump straight in and get everybody introduced. So Hannah, do you want to start off? Do you want to tell us a bit about why you applied to Cambridge, and what do you like about studying geography at Cambridge?
Okay, yeah, sure. So my name's Hannah. I'm a third year geography undergraduate at Cambridge. And I basically applied here because at the beginning of year 12, my teacher started floating the word Oxford around, and they encouraged me to look at the summer schools that were on offer. So that meant I had to choose between Unique at Oxford or Sutton Trust at Cambridge, because I didn't have enough time to do both. And that meant looking at the geography courses that were available. And I much preferred the Cambridge one. That's one of the reasons I like geography at Cambridge, is because of the way the course is structured. So in first year, everybody studies the same amount of human and physical modules, and everyone does the same. So if you've never done glaciology before, you get a chance to figure out whether you like glaciology, which is really important because a few of the girls in our year like came into Cambridge thinking they really loved human geography, and then they came out and now they absolutely love physical and they're doing all physical modules. So yeah, that's really important. And then in second and third year, you get to specialise. But yeah, so I did geography at the Sutton Trust Summer School in the summer of year 12. And it was only when I was there and like doing geography, like we spent a day, like every day doing geography, the same kind of timetable I would have like when I came here, that I decided that geography was for me and that I really wanted to apply here. I was at a different college, I was at Churchill, but yeah, it was really good. I got a really good vibe for how Cambridge works and how the small group teaching is.
Super, thanks. And I think we actually might kind of ask a bit about the summer school later, because I know Victoria said as well, she did it as well. So Victoria, do you want to tell us a bit about why you picked Cambridge and what do you like about geography at Cambridge?
Yeah, definitely. So, like Hannah, I did the Sutton Trust Summer School, but back in 2016. And funnily enough, it was actually at Queen's. So that's probably the main reason as to why I chose Queen's when I ended up applying back in year 13. I think I chose geography because I had always been quite good at humanities when I was in school. And also my geography teachers during my GCSEs and A-levels were amazing. Shout out to them if they end up watching this. And so I think I always really appreciated the variety of different topics within the subject. So I thought, you know what, I probably should do this. I think another thing that was quite important to me, obviously because my parents are migrants. And so I think a lot of the people I know from my community tend to not necessarily do like geography or like classics or like more rogue subjects. I say rogue, not really rogue, because of like, you know, a variety of reasons. So I think I then knew that I had to then be very proactive when I was in school to find people who were geography graduates, but were doing it, you know, amazingly in their life and weren't really limited to certain career options. So I had a really, really good mentor. And then like he currently works in consulting and he helped me a lot during my application to university, and he did geography at Cambridge. So I think that was the main reason. So the breadth of different topics and how I was always quite good at geography and the humanities back in school, but then also knowing that geography as a subject, contrary to popular belief, is really, really good for students in regards to employability and like future career options.
Oh, sorry, I just put myself on mute, put both of us on mute. Yeah, so careers, I think it's really interesting what you've just said, Victoria, also about how geography is like one of the most employable subjects as well. Just really quickly, whilst we're on it, what topics have you found most interesting when at Cambridge? So what are you kind of specialising in? And do you know what career you might want to do after university? Yeah,
so I have always really enjoyed both human and physical geography. So actually going into third year, I'm still going to study volcanology as well as 3 other human geography papers. But in second year, I really, really enjoyed the citizenship and societies module because it mentioned a variety of really interesting topics about social movements, but also looking at race and citizenship within the UK and how it's changed over time. And I think someone who is a second generation migrant, like that was really fascinating to me. I also really liked the development module with Dr. Emma Maudsley. I thought that was really fascinating because I did development at GCSE, so it's interesting doing the topic, but at university instead. So yeah, I think if anything, geography at university is so different from geography at GCSE and A-level because it's just so much more broad. Things you wouldn't really deem as geography are geography when you go to university. So I think that's something that's really important to try and consider.
And we're going to go back to Hannah in a second, but whilst we've got you, Victoria, just kind of firing some questions at you. Many students are obviously very daunted about applying to Oxbridge, and I think Hannah mentioned it before, saying like her teacher started to maybe say like the word Oxbridge and start to think about it, and you both went to a summer school as well. What advice do you have for a student who's like, I don't know if Oxbridge is right for me, or who's kind of on the edge? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, definitely. So I do quite a lot of mentoring, so I'm always answering these kind of questions. I'd probably say I've got 2 main pieces of advice. Firstly is about getting a good support network. You know, no one person is an island, so you need to try and get support with regards to the person's statement, the interview. So get some really, really practical tips. So in the link in the description, there's a link to charities like Zero Gravity, Project Access, and these are organisations for free. You know, students from state schools can apply and get a free mentor who can help you during the application process. So that definitely helps you with I guess, feeling less worried about Cambridge and what to expect at the university. Secondly, I also think, you've got 5 options. You might as well choose it just in case, like you don't know, what can come of it. And actually speaking to a lot of my friends at Cambridge who are doing different subjects, they all mentioned how going through the Cambridge application process meant they found a better love for their subject. I was doing a lot more reading from personal statement, and I wouldn't have, it sounds really weird, but I just wouldn't have done that reading if I wasn't going to apply to Cambridge, because I wasn't really encouraged, I guess, in that way. So yes, it's just like one of your 5 options. So I guess you might as well like give a shot. Like you don't know if you don't try. And also there's literally nothing to gain other than a variety of skills you'll gain. And also, I guess even doing the interview, having the option to speak to academics when you're like 17, 18 years old is like a really good opportunity in the grand scheme of things. Yeah.
Super. And I really like the idea about kind of getting a support network, particularly for students whose parents might not have even gone to university as well. So kind of not even having that university experience to then also actually having someone who can mentor you through it. And yeah, and as Victoria said, everybody, there is loads of links below. So do check the description. Hannah and Victoria have been super useful in like writing everything down. So check out about that because of mentoring. And if you do have any specific questions on that, please do write some down. There's already some questions coming through. So if anybody does have any other questions, please write them down. I can see some are coming up about personal statements as well, so we can go through them. But yeah, just write down any questions that you have. Let's go on to Hannah. How did you select your college? I know you said you went to one college and then and changed. But what did you do to actually decide that Queen's College was the college for you at Cambridge?
Yeah, sure. So the Sutton Trust Summer School, I was based at Churchill College, which is quite far away from the geography department. So whilst I was there, as like you're walking in, it's a really beautiful walk, but I was thinking I can't really do this every day. And then one afternoon we got the opportunity to choose 3 colleges we wanted to look around. So I looked around Queen's, St John's, and I think it was Christ's. And I came to Queen's, and this is the same way I chose my secondary school. It's just the atmosphere. Like, when you think you're going to fit in and you're going to find like, it's just so friendly here. And I loved the like architecture, the way it looks, it's just really beautiful. And I missed the open days. So this was actually the only time I managed to visit Queen's. So yeah, and then I went home and I started Googling Queen's. I looked through the website. I looked on the JCR website, which is basically like the school council, but for the college. And I also looked at alternative prospectuses because there are quite a few resources out there for like on the student room, and it's like students, once they're here, they make not jokes, but like each college has its little quirks, and it just really appealed to me. Like it seemed like such a nice place to be. So that's how I chose it. And yeah, what college you choose is quite important to like how your time at Cambridge goes, because each college is so unique, and like the way it tailors your interests and what you want to do is like really important.
Okay, yeah, sorry. There's 4 of us is getting my mic confused. We've got all of you on screen now, and I just thought there's 4 of us up so everybody can see. Hannah started speaking about Queen's, but Victoria, how about you, and also Graham as well, as kind of like, I don't know if I can describe you as the bones of Queen's geography. I'm not sure if that's correct. But what do you guys think about Queen's, and if students are applying for Cambridge, like why do you think Queen's? Victoria, should we start with you?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I mainly chose Queen's because of the summer school. But then also there's like another reason as well. But most importantly, obviously when you're young, you don't really think about this. But like kind of mentioned, the Queen's is so close to the geography department. It's literally like, I've timed it, it's a 7-minute walk. And as someone who didn't want to have a bike, I think it was quite useful to be in the centre of town. I think also personally, I think I've had a really, really good experience of Queen's in general. There's a really like great community of people who I've been able to meet. I think definitely the location is probably one of the best things. And also has great facilities. There's a gym, there's a squash court. Yeah, the location's really nice. And it's got a nice bridge as well. So that's something to consider.
Fantastic. Graham, do you have anything to add about why students should be at Queen's?
Sure, yeah. I think my perspective will differ a little bit because, I didn't come to the the college because of its social environment and stuff like that, which is really important, obviously, for university. It's super important, but I think the academic side of it is distinctive too, right? So the geography at Queen's is pretty deliberate. I mean, we never actually had a fellow in geography, which is to say somebody who actually taught geography until 2015. From the first time the college was created, which was in the mid 15th century. So it's fairly new actually in like how deliberate we are as a community. So I think that's excellent. So we've grown quite a bit in the last few years, and we're kind of pretty deliberately trying to make it a community of people who are interested in problems about the world, who are coming to Cambridge and want to ask particular kinds of questions and things like that. So we're trying to make it a very inviting sort of place, I think, to study, but also to feel welcome, because a lot of people have a lot of trepidations about applying to a place like Cambridge and Oxford, right? That they're these big scary places and there's so much baggage around what they are and who went there and can I ever even apply and should I bother and will I feel welcome there? Well, we're trying to kind of like not do that. Like we're trying to make Queen's in particular and geography a place that people can arrive and and really feel like they're welcome and that they can thrive and grow and do interesting things while they're there. So I don't think that's necessarily the case for all of the colleges. A lot of them are like that, but it's something that we're really trying to attend to deliberately. Both Hannah and Victoria and lots of the other people in geography are like really active in college life in trying to make the college an interesting and thriving place. And so I think that's an excellent part of it all. It's worth for anybody who wants to apply to Cambridge, it's worth thinking about the college. What is their geography community like? Do they have a fellow in geography? Do they have a student body? Do they have a geography society? Are the students involved in kinds of in different activities? So that stuff is really important for us at Queen's, and I think that varies across different colleges. Yeah.
Super. And I don't know, putting either of you on the spot, Hannah and Victoria, but a day in the life. Obviously, I went to Bristol, and you have your halls and then you go to your lectures. However, one part which is so special about Cambridge is you have smaller tutorials, and that's all kind of really makes like geography as well. So can you give us like a quick overview, one of you, I don't mind who, what would be kind of like a day in the life in the college life? And then I know also, Hannah, maybe you want to explain also, because you're part of a committee, which Victoria might have been part of as well. Why is that important to making college life so special?
I could answer the question about the JCR committee, if that's fine. So I was in the JCR, basically this year, so 2019, 2020, and I was a Black, Asian, minority ethnic officer. And so I think for me, being at Queen's, I think pretty much like Graham said it in a nutshell, I did not expect Cambridge, for me personally, again, I can't speak for anyone else's experience, but I didn't expect it to be as inclusive as it was. I think especially because I was able to meet amazing people at Queen's in particular, especially people in the year above. And I think that definitely made a big impact on me feeling like I was able to fit in to the university, but also thrive in the space as well. And so I think with the JTR being on the committee, I was able to do quite a wide variety of things. So most recently, I did like a BAME Access Day for state school students of like African, Caribbean, Asian heritage, and that was virtually. But also the Queen's Admissions team were really, really open with helping me with that, and also getting a lot of other undergraduates at Queen's, also St. Catherine's College, which is another college in Cambridge, involved. So I think for me, I definitely have been really surprised with how inclusive the college has been. Again, I can only speak from my own experience, but yeah, that's like one example. And obviously Hannah is currently on the JCR right now. She can speak more about that.
So I'm Sports and Societies Officer, which means over summer, obviously lockdown, the JCR has a really big role in ensuring the welfare of all of the undergraduate student body. So that means we run weekly events virtually, so everyone maintains contact, especially if you're an international student, for instance. It might feel quite isolated to be so far away from college. But ordinarily, I just oversee and manage all of the societies at Queen's. We have about 50 of them. So I oversee the registration process, and I would normally run a societies fair for incoming freshers. That's going virtual this year as well. So that's my role. But we basically just look after the welfare of students and ensure that everyone's needs are met. So that means like in a day in the life of like college life, I also row. So normally I'd be getting up early in the morning, and then I'd have like an outing for a couple of hours, get back at 9 to go to a lecture. And then we normally have, I'd say like normally 2 lectures or 3 lectures, depending on the day. And then in the afternoon, you might have a supervision, which is a small group teaching session. So it would be like Graham and then Victoria and I, and perhaps one other student. And then in the evening, you may have, like for me, I might have like a JCR meeting, or you just relax with friends and then do the work required for the essay, which might be due in the next week or something. So there's so much time to get involved in other stuff. Like both Victoria and I have had time to get involved in other things as well. And we've both got extracurricular activities and extracurricular interests. So I wouldn't worry about this idea of like Oxbridge being really daunting workload heavy environment. Like it is, you do have to do like a lot of work, but if you're interested in your subject, like you're going to enjoy it, and then there's enough time to get involved in whatever else you want.
Super. So we're going to do in a bit a quick overview of what actually is like the geography that we're studying. But if we first will have a little chat about the interview process, I understand that might be changing for this year with I'm not sure how you might want to explain further, but Hannah, let's start with Victoria. Victoria, how did you find the interview process, and what tips do you have? You've already given us one tip saying there's mentors out there as well that students can kind of get hold of. But yeah, how was your interview and top tips?
Yeah, so I always, like I mentioned, because I do mentoring, I always talk about this. My interview for Cambridge was literally hands out one of the best interviews I've done ever in my life. And I say that because, so I had it with Graham and I had it with another, like Dr. Mia Gray. And I think one thing that kind of surprised me was obviously I didn't know that many people who went to Cambridge from my school. So I was the second person to ever go to Cambridge. So I was kind of just taken up from resources online. So I think people kind of hype it up, people kind of make it scary. But then going into the interview, Graham just pretty much said, we want you to answer the questions from like your perspective, utilizing the knowledge you do know. So I think that was like quite useful. And so I guess some more practical advice would be reading over your personal statement. If you said you read a book, make sure you have actually read it. And then if you've got more time, look at different synopses, or like try and research a bit more into the area, which probably goes back to the personal statement. It's called a personal statement for a reason. Make sure you're putting in topics that you're actually interested in, because if you then get asked about it at interview, you can speak about it, a lot more easily than if you were to, pick a road topic that you don't actually care that much about. So that's definitely something I'd recommend. I'd also recommend trying to get mock interviews. So like I mentioned, Project Access, Zero Gravity, also charities. So these are all third sector charities. Perhaps the government should actually do more. But charities like the Social Mobility Foundation, into university, you can get a mentor and get help with regards to your Oxbridge applications. That's definitely, something to consider. So definitely practice. If it's with teachers, if this is like online mentors. I think another practical tip I would mention, especially from a school where you don't know that many people who applied to Oxbridge, like I did, I actually mentored 4 students this year with applying to Cambridge, and they're all coming in October. And one of them actually reached out to me on LinkedIn. So I know this is a bit of a rogue tip, but I definitely recommend, if you don't know anyone from Cambridge, definitely get a LinkedIn account and literally just reach out to current undergraduates, because you never know. I guess my motto in life, one of my many mottos, if you don't ask, you don't get. And especially if you are like, less advantaged, definitely be proactive in trying to reach your goals basically in life. And, people are literally out there to help you for free. So yeah, obviously ask nicely. I trust you too.
That's super. And there's a few questions kind of which were based on the interview. So one of which you've already answered, Victoria, which is fantastic. So is it heavily personal, based on your personal statement? I'm just making sure that you know what you've written in your personal statement and can justify everything. So that was really good. And then just before we go on to Hannah, there's another question from Rebecca saying, so you said the interview went well, which was good. So what did you find was the most difficult part of the application process for you? Was it actually like preparing for that interview and then it ended up going better than you expected? Or was it kind of writing your personal statement? What's the most difficult part?
I think for me personally, I'll say preparing for the interview. So you probably might not tell this, but when I was younger, so when I was back in sixth form, I used to talk so fast. So when I was in the interview setting, I would just be rambling on and on and on. But because of mock interviews, it meant that by the time I actually got to my Cambridge interview, hopefully, I don't know if Graham can agree to this, but I was speaking a lot more slowly. So just speaking out loud, speaking about geography out loud definitely helps you with the interview setting. And I also was obviously quite nervous with thinking about, oh, would I get into Cambridge or not? So I guess trying to calm my nerves. So definitely the interview is probably the most scary aspect. Although another tip I would give, I think especially, people think there's like a typical Cambridge student. There isn't. So in light of that, on your personal statement, I'd recommend utilising your own cultural capital rather than trying to fit into a certain mould. There is no mould. Like if you're academic, if you care about your subject, then that's what Cambridge students have in common, not someone's class, not someone's like ethnicity, not where someone's from or their accent. So I think with that in mind, on your personal statement, to make yourself stand out, I literally wrote about being from East London. I wrote about having migrant parents. I wrote about how my area almost shaped my understanding of geography. So I think, that's probably like an interesting tip for you on your personal statement to like make you stand out. Basically like utilise your background, utilise your cultural capital to kind of make you understand geography more and also stand out, I guess.
Super. Thanks for that. And if we go, Hannah, how did you find the interview, and what tips do you have on the interview?
Okay, yeah, so the interview can seem really daunting. I mean, for me, like the closest I'd come to an interview was for my part-time job at Greg's. Like it was a very new situation for me, and I didn't have like anyone really who could help me. So I was looking online, and Cambridge on their YouTube do actually recommend that basically interviewers kind of want to understand how you think. So I practice by like talking out loud to myself and following my train of thought. And then, as Victoria said, I made sure that everything in my personal statement I knew about and I was interested in. And some people might think like in your personal statement, you just drop names in of 5 books you've read. It's much better to talk about one book that you found really interesting and then you did a research project on it or something than just trying to cram in as much as you can. So I remember I did a project on water scarcity, and I remember talking with Graham and Mia for quite a while about that. And that actually, yeah, yeah, okay, sorry, bringing back memories. So yeah, I would recommend trying to like narrow down what you're focusing on. And also before my interview, I don't think Graham knows this, but before my interview, I Googled both Graham and Mia. So I knew what they looked like. And if I could find a YouTube clip of them to see them, like hear them and see like how they spoke and everything, I did that so I could feel more comfortable going in, knowing what they looked like, knowing who I was speaking to. So I'd really recommend doing that, just so if you do get an interview, you're not going in there completely blind. You know what's coming.
Super, that's a really useful tips, like all of them, particularly about like the reading books as well. It's actually much better that you can talk about something in detail. Graham, what do you have on the interview process for future applicants, and how is it potentially, how's it going to be different this year, if it's going to be different this year?
Mm-hmm. So we did do a mock interview, which I think is on YouTube. It should be in the links, I think, down below there. But so that should kind of, we can walk through what the process is like. But in general, at Queen's, we're really not interested. And we always say this part of, we're not really interested in finding out what you don't know. What we really want is to get a sense of like how you're thinking and how deep you can go when we push you into something, right? So like if you have passion for water scarcity, then we're going to be like, let's talk about water scarcity and let's see how far we can go into this conversation about water scarcity, right? The absolute worst thing you can do is to throw out a bunch of books or a bunch of names or a bunch of ideas that you've read very tangentially, or you saw one chapter, or you did, you skimmed it and put that in there, because we're going to ask you about that, and we're going to want to know, well, so tell us about the details of this thing that you've mentioned, right? The depth of the conversation matters a lot more than your ability to spread yourself very thinly across, a bunch of different things that you might want to say. I think Victoria is entirely right to say that, we want to have a sense of like who you are as an individual, right? We don't want to know that you read Prisoners of Geography and that you can rehearse the argument of Prisoners of Geography. We want to know, like, why is that interesting to you? What did you read from it? What critique might you have of Prisoners of Geography or another recent book, right? So there's a lot that we want to be able to see how you think, how you have a conversation, how you might engage with some ideas and things like that. So it's not at all about, what you don't know. It's very much about like, okay, let's talk. Let's see how far we can go. This year, in terms of how interviews are going to go, I think we know that it's really very unlikely that they will be in person. It's kind of out of my scope to say exactly what it's going to be like, but but I think we can generally presume that they're going to be online interviews. Again, each college is suggesting different things this year, and the experience across colleges is always very different, right? So some colleges you might have 2 interviews. Sometimes you even have 3. You might have a physical geography interview, a human geography interview, and then one with a senior tutor. And all of those things might be online, some might be in person, that kind of stuff. So it's worth kind of thinking about it and exploring it a little bit, actually. So one thing I would say before I forget, because I would forget, is that Cambridge is having an open day on Thursday, this coming Thursday, and all of it is online. And so it's an incredible opportunity, actually, for people to go and explore stuff, listen in on conversations, find out more about specific colleges, about geography, and that kind of stuff. So we're having a session at 4:00 on Thursday, the details of which I think people can find on the Queen's website and also on the Cambridge Admissions Office website. But so I encourage you to go to those kinds of things and ask some questions. And so if we don't get to some of the questions that we might deal with here, you'll be able to ask those questions in those other kinds of sessions. Yeah.
Super. Just one question which I think is kind of relevant to this before we go on to topics, and I've got a few questions from people asking what are your favourite topics, which we'll get on to in a bit. But Graham, probably for you, and this is from Hilary saying, my interest is primarily lies in physical geography. Is it fine for me to only include physical geography on my personal statement, or should I include both human and physical geography?
Yeah. And tell us about who you are. Why are you passionate about physical geography, some aspects of physical geography? It is the case that Cambridge in the first year, you have to do human and you have to do physical. And that's the structure of the course. But you specialize very quickly after that. In the second year, you can take all physical, you can take all human, or you can do a mixture. We're not really interested in you telling us something that you're not really passionate about in geography. So if you're like, boy, I really love the physical stuff, I am totally about glaciers and climate change, or I'm totally about, botany and the way plant life is being reshaped in particular places, like, tell us about that. Go into great depth about one thing that you really, really like, if that's the case, right? If you really are excited about something, tell us about how you're excited about it. Tell us what you've read about that. Tell us how the ideas of someone that you've read on that point are like really interesting to you, or perhaps why they're good, but also like maybe they're missing something. That's an astounding thing actually to have in a personal statement. We don't want you to tell us about things that you're not really interested in. We don't want you to kind of be guessing about what you think that we might want to hear. We would like to hear from you about what really drives you. Like, why geography for you? What's cool? What's cool about geography?
Cool. Well, I think that answers your question, Hilary. So just talk about what interests you, and then that will make the best personal statement for you personally. Super. And then, Graham, can you tell us a bit about what is actually the course? What do students expected to study? I know we talked about there's mixed human and physical in the first year, but just a bit more detail. What particularly modules are they, and what options do students have to go on to in second and third year?
Mm-hmm. Good. So the much of this detail will be available on the geography website, which I think there's a link on the YouTube site there, and so you can see exactly what some of the offerings are and what they have been. But generally speaking, in the first year, which we call 1A, there's no real good reason why we call it 1A. I mean, there's a bureaucratic reason, but we don't need to get into that stuff. You do human, you do physical. On the human side, you cover topics like cultural geography, you cover economic geography, you cover unequal geography, urban geography, and then we have society and environmental development, right? Or something to that effect. So there's a series of them which more or less don't change. They're kind of like pretty central in the way things work. And then on the physical side, you have something quite similar to that, right? So you have the earth, you have a number of other topics that deal with coasts. You do a number of different interesting things. And each of them has basically 4 or 5 lectures that you take over the term, and they come in chunks, right? So you do some urban at the end of Michaelmas term, which is essentially the period between October and the Christmas holiday break. And it's like 3 or 4 lectures, and you do that, and then you have a supervision alongside. In the second year, there's a choice of 6 potential papers or courses, and you would choose from those 6, and they would be something like, so I think the human ones last year were development, austerity, and citizenship. And then the physical ones, I'd have to be reminded actually for what they were, but we had so there were glaciers, right? There was I think there's coasts again, and then there's another one. But anyway, so you can choose among those different ones. They also don't really change that much. They're pretty static in the way that, like, we might get different lectures on them in a given year, but they more or less stay the same. In the 3rd year, that's where you really start to specialize, because you do both your dissertation, which is a completely independent project that you define yourself, and you do supervisions with a particular academic who's a specialist on that topic. And then you do like quite specific papers, right? So like a paper just on urban topics, a paper just on political ecology, a paper just on economic geography, a paper just on post-coloniality and decolonialization, right? And so that you get really, really specific, which is excellent because you can really go into great depth into what you want. And the dissertation, I mean, Victoria and Hannah can talk about it because they've just been doing their own research on a topic that they have decided. It's been disrupted a little bit this year, unfortunately, but it's like purely, what do you like about geography? Where would you go? What would you do? And how would you ask questions about problems in the world? So there's a great deal of flexibility, especially, I think, after the 1st year. Yeah.
I think I was just going to add, there's also a field trip. Well, obviously, that got cancelled this year because of COVID. So no field trip for us, unfortunately. But there's a field trip every single year to different places like Berlin, Mallorca. So that's something to look forward to.
Oh, wow, super. From a question from Archie, this kind of links into potentially dissertations as well. What has been your favourite topic on one of the courses that you studied? So maybe if you could answer that, and then what is do you know what your dissertation is going to be on? So Victoria, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So in my 1st year, I really enjoyed Philip Howell's lectures on cultural geography. I think because like I mentioned, from East London, I also always bang on about that. But I also started DJing at university quite recently. So I've always been quite interested in music and culture and popular culture, and also how it relates to cultural identity. And so I feel like with cultural geography, I was able to kind of research into that a bit more, into a bit more details, even looking at things like grime and how grime links in with geography, and how Drake as a rapper links into geography in regards to his identity being quite multifaceted. So that was quite interesting. But also in 2nd year, I really enjoyed citizenship because, like I mentioned earlier, it was really fascinating, to be fair. And I guess my dissertation is on human geography. So looking at educational inequality within London. And it's been quite interesting doing the topic currently.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and really interesting about the music as well, because geography really can be whatever you want it to be, where that is skateboarding. I concentrated on like graffiti artist in Bristol when I was there, so it's kind of just about your passions. The great thing about geography is you really do get to specialise in what you enjoy. Hannah, how about you? Favourite topics that you've studied or units, and what's your dissertation going to be about?
So my favourite unit probably in 1st year was urban geography. So that was the study of cities all across the world, like in the global north and south, which is how we tend to characterise different areas of the globe. And then in 2nd year, that led into citizenship. So like Victoria, I really enjoyed that unit. I also really enjoyed austerity and looking at the impact of that. And also, actually, something to mention is that geography is really, really interdisciplinary. So like we do our exams, but a lot throughout the year you also do coursework. So for austerity, we wrote a proposal for government. So I wrote it for the Irish government about what they should do going forwards in order to combat the impacts of austerity. So that's really interesting. Like that prepares you for a career potentially in that area. And you also do like statistics mapping. So I mapped crime in my local area as well this year for another coursework. So that's really interesting. So I'm interested in urban spaces, which means my dissertation is actually on urban agriculture in Hackney, which is where Victoria's from. I'm basically interested in how we can future-proof our cities, like how we can make them more resilient to climate change going forwards, and what we can do at a local scale to mitigate those impacts, and how community gardens, in particular, that's what I'm looking at, food-growing community gardens, how they interact in our economic landscape at the moment. So yeah, that's what I'm focusing on. Oh, and sorry, I will say I'm specialising this year into a paper called Political Appetites. So that's about food and power essentially, and I'm really looking forward to that module because it's very, very specific. So that just shows like how specific our modules can get.
Super. I could just end up chatting to you guys all about. I want to hear more about your dissertations as well because they both sound so interesting. But we are kind of coming up to. I like to cut this off at kind of 3/4 of an hour. But as I said, like we have been chatting so much. Real quick fire questions. There's just been a few. Some of them I feel will actually be able to be answered as Graham said in the open day, which is happening. So there's someone. There's Aidan, who was asking about different colleges, not about Queen's. So I feel like Aidan, he was saying doesn't know whether to apply for Jesus or Pembroke because, but he's not that sporty. So this is kind of a general question. If you think something's sporty, or should that put you off applying from a college, or do you think it's more about, Hannah said a bit about the feel when you get there? Hannah, do you want to answer that one maybe? I'm not sure if you know anything in particular about Pembroke or Jesus, or maybe we should just convince Aidan to apply to Queen's.
Yeah, I mean, Queen's is the best college, but I mean, it kind of depends. If you're really, really keen on sport, you can always join the university team, which is completely, like, that happens irrespective of what college you go to. But if you want to come and do rowing, Jesus is really good at rowing. So if you want to be in an environment where they are good at rowing, Jesus would be a good option. But Pembroke, they have a lot of really good athletes, for instance. So it does depend on like what sport you're into. But again, that's really not important. Like people come here and set up their own society. Like people come here and set up a hockey society. So if you're really interested in a certain sport and the college doesn't offer it or doesn't have that much of a background in it, that doesn't mean to say that you can't do it and start a society up.
And then probably Graham for you, one student who's saying they do students apply if they haven't done geography A level?
That's a good question. I think typically students do have geography as a kind of a background. I don't think, from my perspective and the perspective of the people who would have some decisions over these things, that strictly speaking is a necessary thing. But what we would want to see is, and that's partly because, there is such a big difference between GCSE and A-level geography and then what you see actually in university, right? What we would want to see is like a pretty good rationale or reason why geography, right? Why could we trust that you're really going to dive head deep into geography, even though you maybe don't have the same kind of background in it, right? So have you done independent reading to that end? What ideas do you have? Why do you have those ideas? Being able to describe to us why the geography choice makes sense to you would be a really big part of it, right? And we would be able, if people are invited to interview in a case like that, to have a good conversation about why that's actually the case, right? That's the kind of thing that would be very much fair play at an interview, right? You don't have this, so why are you here? Tell us more, right?
Super. Well, I think that kind of concludes, and everybody who has asked questions and you guys have all answered have said thank you as well. So I think you've been really helpful for students who are thinking about applying as well. And then, as Graham said, there is going to be the open day as well, which is on Thursday, and then the time for Queen's is at 4 p.m. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can send you the link and you can put it up on the YouTube thing.
Super.
There's a Zoom link, which I'll share.
Super. Yeah. And then is there any, I think you guys have told us so much about it. So a massive thank you from me. Any last words from anyone apart from yes, go for it, apply?
Yeah, I think one last thing. So on a lot of, when you apply to Cambridge, there's a lot of talk about super curricular activities, so doing extracurricular activities that relate to your subject. So I think obviously because of COVID, I definitely recommend watching online lectures, LSE, Cambridge, there's so many online lectures related to geography, so definitely get involved with that, utilising the internet whilst it's free. And then also I definitely recommend the RGS. So they've got essay competitions, also they've got a podcast, which I featured in, quick plug, I featured in earlier this year, but I think it's really, really good for you to know more about geography as a discipline by hearing about conversations with different academics, but then also Ellie's YouTube channel is great for looking at geography and knowing more about the discipline in greater detail.
Super, thanks. Hannah, any last words from you apart from go apply?
Yeah, honestly go for it. You don't really have anything to lose by not going for it, and it's well worth it. I mean, yeah, like, it's just worth it. And thank you for having us on today.
Oh no, thank you guys so much. Graham, any last words apart from hopefully see some people at the interview?
Well, definitely that. I mean, Cambridge and Oxford are interesting and bizarre in many different ways, but they're really not as scary as I think people make them out to be. So really do apply, take a chance if you feel like it is something that's not for you. We'd like to see you. And I think it'd be great to have as many people apply as possible.
Brilliant. Well, thank you guys so much again. I'm just going to round up for those who are still on my channel and potentially wanting to watch another one. So at 6:30 today, so we've got 2 in a row today, actually a bit different from geography. So we're talking to UCL about their Global Humanitarian Studies course. So if you're kind of interested in that area, it links with many other topics, not just geography as well. So that will be on at 6:30 today as a potential other option. But yes, good luck. I hope you enjoyed their their open day on Thursday. If you've got any more questions, and have a nice evening, everybody else as well. So from me, goodbye. Hopefully see you at 6:30, and again next week we'll be on with a live interview about GIS. So if you're doing A levels, it'll be really good for the NEA as well.